Yeah, I need to pay more attention to the clock when I'm doing this. Um, get so enmeshed in doing the things that I'm working on that I totally space on it. All right, so yeah, when I'm working on like moving my belongings out of here for the week, because this is not where I don't have a rental agreement to be here, so it's the place that I'm staying is not a rental place. It's a place of somebody I know. And whenever they have a purpose for the space that doesn't involve me, I have to relocate. So that's what we're doing today. Planning to be out of here by tomorrow night and take everything of mine with me for a week before I can really come back and do stuff. And that's kind of hard. I don't know what I'm going to be doing for video during the 5 nights that I won't be here. I'll figure it out. But I'm also in the midst of sort of falling in love with the researching the data for some of this fitness stuff. I was looking at I keep saying I'm doing cardio, pleo, and HIIT, and the more I look at it, the less it is those three categories. Cardio is pretty much stuck where it is because that's pretty standard. It is pretty well recognized as the thing I'm doing. The what I call pleo is a smaller subset of what I'm really aiming for. And what I'm focusing on, really, what I'm aiming to focus on is the fact that in your physical health, fitness routines, you have there's things like flexibility too, and I may do some flexibility stuff in a future thing. But for right now, really just looking at some big markers of fitness. I don't always agree with some of the assessment of that, but the big markers for that are going to be your cardio fitness and then your muscle fitness. Now, your muscle fitness really comes into two types: your slow and steady muscle application and your explosive or fast twitch muscle application. So fast twitch muscle applications do benefit from pleo exercises, plyometrics. But plyometrics are not the only means of accessing and working and training those. And my mind says I want to focus on each of these three categories. So endurance through cardio, slow and steady muscle application, and rapid explosive muscle application. And for cardio, it's really just sort of like you need about 45 minutes or longer of energy expenditure, heart rate up, breathing, aerobic activity. And for slow and steady muscle application, that's more along the lines of just that's putting the work in over and over again gradually. You can do it with, and it's another category that I may expand on later where I do like, what's the best way to work on some of that? Is it overload weight work, or is it like 3 lifts of your maximum capability, or is it better to do 3 reps of 10 lifts of a low weight? Now, the truth on an issue like that is going to be more along the lines of that, both are good for you and both have something to offer, and getting the right balance between the two of them is important, or is important for getting the best return on the efforts you put into an activity like fitness. So in my mind, what I really want to do for these things isn't say which is better. It's more about like, okay, so if I do this, my body responds to this way. And knowing that, I can gauge where the best response for the invested effort fit in with the best response from the invested effort of all the other components, and assemble a routine or a fitness ideal that works best for me. Part of that was like, yeah, I think I had an absolute blast the other night talking about some of the dietary stuff, where at the end of the month of with the 4 weeks through the cardio stuff, like I'm looking at the possibility of like, we were talking about how many calories does a box of waffles have? And two blueberry Nutri-Grain waffles have 180 calories between the two of them. They're 8 per box. I can eat an entire box of waffles in a day with syrup and applesauce and cinnamon and still have room for my caloric ceiling by almost 1,000 calories. And so like my brain looks at that and goes like, that's absurd. Like I could get a chocolate bar that there's like 3 servings for this chocolate bar, and that chocolate bar has 130 calories per serving. So that's essentially 400 calories for the chocolate bar. And if I do the entire box of waffles, I could sort of like, what was it? I could do 2 chocolate bars, an entire box of waffles, and that would bring me into my calorie count. Now, clearly, eating 8 waffles and 2 chocolate bars for your food that day, like you could do, what was it? No. I ran the calculations in my head. What was it? I had said something to the effect of, I could eat 4 waffles and half a chocolate bar 4 times a day to meet my calorie count for the day for somebody at my level. And like the realization of that was just like, yeah, you could do that. There is absolutely no reason why you couldn't do that, except for there is no part of that that is a healthy diet. And it's not giving you the nutrients your body needs. It's not the right balance of macronutrients. It's not the right balance of micronutrients. And my experience with caloric intake of such high levels of carbohydrate suggests to me that I will also be toting around about 15 pounds of extra water weight. And I will feel bloated and squishy because of all that water builds up in some of the soft tissues and makes me feel like a bowl full of jelly. And, you know, so clearly there's more to it than that. But also you're looking at the possibility of what's that doing to your cholesterol, blood pressure, your thyroid function? What's that doing to your metabolic rate? Is it slowing it, increasing it? What is that doing for your insulin secretion? And what is that doing for your insulin sensitivity? What is that doing for your satiation? So, like, I did a day today, sort of like just a stupid binge of a lot of sugar, but I'm still well under my caloric intake for the day. But 20 minutes after eating a lot of sugar, which should have been like a 500 calorie meal, should have been enough to satisfy me for the next 2 hours to 3 hours. 15 minutes after that, 20 minutes after that, I go into the fridge craving some kind of protein because I need something that's going to stick to me. And that sugar's not doing it. And so, like, the way your body reacts and behaves in response to those things. And also for me, I also have some health concerns that react certain ways to things. So my digestive system's probably going to go crazy. But the other thing I get a lot of is I've had flares of gout in the past, and high levels of glucose in your system can actually irritate gout and provoke gout-like symptoms. And so, like, those are all factors that aren't accounted for when one says, like, oh, you're supposed to get 2,500 calories in a day. They're not even accounted for when you do 2,500 calories at 30 to 45% carbohydrate levels. It just doesn't take that into account. And so for dietary concerns like that, yes, you could eat 2 boxes of waffles and 2 candy bars and meet your requirements for the day for calories. And probably, because many of them would be fortified with certain things, you'd get most of your minerals, you'd get all your carbohydrate needs for the day. You would get a fair amount, because they're probably fortified. I'd wager you'd get enough of your B12, B6, folate, maybe niacin, and if they're Nutri-Grain thingies, you're likely to be getting some of your vitamin content from them. With blueberries, you might get your vitamin C content just barely. And because they're blueberry waffles, they will carry a few other of the nutrients that you need. You're going to be short on a few things. But here's the thing. Most of the nutrients you get on a regular basis from your food, like your B12, like you can get absolutely zero B12 in your system every day for 3 months. And for most people, it's not even going to show up as low, because it's something that builds up in your body and stays high for long periods of time and then gradually depletes. And it takes time to build it back up. It's a gradual change. So vitamins like E, A, I'm not sure about K. K might be a water soluble, but many of your fat solubles. So A, E, D, and B12, which I think is also a water soluble, and folates are more gradual buildups. Whereas if you get too much vitamin C in a day, you'll just piss out the rest of it. And if you get too low vitamin C for a while, it can take I think 3 days to 3 weeks, depending on how deficient you are, to build yourself up to the level your body needs again. But that's a short window. Weeks is much less than months to reorganize your B12 levels. And your vitamin D, when it goes low, it can take months to get it back up again. And the form that you get it in can make a difference. I had really low vitamin D at one point, and they tried to prescribe like a D2, I think it was, which has poor absorption levels in the intestine. And since I have inflammatory intestinal issues, I already have difficulty absorbing them, and I have a genetic predisposition to absorb that worse than other people. So I really am not good at absorbing that. And so supplementing with a poorly absorbed supplement in a system that's inflamed and won't absorb well, while being genetically predisposed to absorb even worse. But D3, which D3 is a much more bioavailable form of vitamin D. And I got it in the oil capsules, because the part of the digestive system that it absorbs into is usually like the part where I have the inflammation. And oils are absorbed in that part of the intestine. So packaging it in something that has to be combined with oil-based foods to get to a point where it absorbs better makes less sense than just getting it in an oil suspension that works best. So that's what I did in it. I got mine up way faster than they thought was possible, considering my poor absorption, my inflammation, and my predisposition to not absorb it well. And D3 works better for that than D2. There are methyl B12s that absorb much more readily than the cyano whatevers that they use for B12. And because that's another one that I absorb poorly, methyls work better for me. And a good example of how poorly that works, how poorly I absorb that is good sources of B12 are like shrimp, certain seafood, and beef. And here's the thing. Every meal for a year, beans, beef, shrimp, seafood, clams, that kind of stuff, all have B12 in them. Every meal, every day for over a year was either some form of fish or ground beef with lentils, which should have been way more than my body needed of those things. But eating all of that, I still had to add a supplement to it. My levels weren't low, but my levels were still in the normal range, but they were low normal. And I was having compounding conditions that indicate it benefits from raising B12. So consuming 3 or 4 meals a day of seafood or beef or beans should have had way more folate and B12 than I needed. But my body wasn't pulling it in. So I had to add a supplement to it. And it still took a couple months for the supplement to get my levels up to a level that my doctor was satisfied with. And so, like, different people's bodies absorb things differently, and knowing how they behave is important. But a lot of what I'm doing in these experiments right now, and I don't even really want to call them experiments because they're not clinically viable. There are too many variables to make them reasonable. But I have certain gross expectations, and I mean by that like overarching large expectations that experience tells me I should reasonably be able to anticipate happening. I know how my body responds to large amounts of carbohydrate. So I know a carb-heavy diet is going to have some consequences that I can expect to have. Now, is that going to be the case for everybody? Probably not. I do know there are some people who do really well with that kind of thing. But I know to a certain degree how my body's going to behave on a high or even a no-carb diet. I know what the consequences of those actions are on the larger scale. And so, like, I kind of, like, there's a part of me, like, if I could get away with it, and I might be stupid enough to do this for like a week or maybe 2 weeks, but I kind of want to do, like, I'm a little queasy today, so it would be hard. It would be really hard on the body to do long term. But looking at something like talking with my friends today about some of the, like, the waffles and candy bar situation, like looking at a candy bar saying like a serving is 130 calories, 3 servings per bar. So let's see. 130 times 3 be 400 roughly. Well, it's 390, or yeah, something like that, times 3. I should trust my brain more. I always second guess myself. I should work on that in a mental health week at some point. But so 390 for 1 candy bar. So let's say we take our 2,850 calorie intake for a day and divide that by 390. So 7 candy bars per day would get me my caloric intake requirements. There's a part of me, just like that smart aleck part of me, that kind of wants to do like per week for like a week, nothing but candy bars. That would wreck me. That would do horrible things to my body. But it's sort of just kind of reductio ad absurdum. It's taking the point that 7 candy bars, well, actually it's 7.3 candy bars per day. And I suppose that 0.3 I could eat a salad. Because a salad, like a decent sized salad with no dressing or anything on it, would get me most of the other minerals and vitamins that my body needs. I could build a salad that would get me my daily vitamin requirements. And then the rest of the day is nothing but candy bars. And just like, I know that's not healthy. We all know that's not healthy. But knowing that I could keep under that caloric intake, get all of my vitamins and minerals, and have my diet consist predominantly of 7 candy bars a day for however long I would do that, is sort of to prove a point that the guidelines of these many calories in a day, like I might even be able to source candy bars that give you the right balance of like the fats, the carbohydrate, well, it's probably going to be high carbohydrate, but the fats and the protein involved also in them could end up being enough that they meet your macronutrient needs for the day. That'd be insane. And all in an effort to sort of prove like the idiocy of like chasing those numbers without reasonably thinking out and reasoning out the fact that it doesn't matter if you're getting the right amount of protein, the right amount of fat, the right amount of carbohydrates, and the right amount of calories, and getting the nutrients you need from vitamin A's, C's, and K's, and all the others. It doesn't matter if you're getting all those right if your diet consists of things you know can't be healthy long term. It's far better for you health wise to eat fresh vegetables, lean protein, some fruits, and maybe some grain every now and then. It's far better for you health wise. By the same token, if we take these exercise and fitness training routines, like I can burn as many calories as I need to burn in a day, and I can give the challenges to the muscles that need to be challenged on a regular basis. But that doesn't make me healthier. Like one of the things you see a lot of is with certain people who get on these fitness kicks is they'll either overwork their bodies to a degree that they do damage to their liver, their kidneys. Like people who work out so aggressively that they go through rhabdo, which is early like cascading destruction of kidneys. I mean, you pee brown, and if you don't resolve some of the issues quickly, you die. You can die of it. And so, like, there's some people who do that, and then you have some people who are working for these like ripped muscles. And when they're doing this and they keep pushing in a certain direction with some of those things, you see conditions like this bubble gut stuff that's going on. And you start to see like people are wondering why it's happening, and you look into the data for it, and there's some question as to whether or not part of what's happening there is visceral fat. So like they've got like 4% body fat under the surface of their skin, so you can see all the fibers of their muscles and their veins, and so they look like they don't have an ounce of fat on them. But wrapped around their organs are these wads of fat that are damaging their organs in a certain way. And there's some of that. And there are a few other things like enlarging or like fatty liver disease or things like that. It's just not good for you. And you think they're doing really good, healthy things because they're fitness buffs. They're in the gym every day doing exercises, and they're eating a lot of like micronutrients and macronutrients to meet their body's requirements. So like these thresholds, you must get this per day. They're getting all of those things. The question is, what else are they doing that are potentially causing damage? And are the ways in which they're doing these things damaging them? Because like I said, I could eat candy bars and a salad and get everything right in the day, but we know that's not good for me. And so like I find some of that fascinating, and I feel like if I had a better healthcare system where I am, if I had doctors I could depend on, and if I had the finances to fund some of the testing that I'd like to do, I think there would be reasonably responsible ways I could do that. So like it would be really great if I had unlimited budget, had a doctor who would pay attention to me. I'd go in on week 1 and say like, look, this is, or 3 weeks before I even start doing a project like that, go into the doctor and say like, run all the tests. We'll get a baseline of where I'm at so that we can measure where I go progressively along this path. And then each week I come back in, we do some blood tests to see what's changed in the last week. And do some, at-home blood sugar testing, at-home blood pressure testing, and those types of things. And just like a daily understanding of your insulin levels, your blood glucose, your blood oxygen, your blood pressure, and those types of things. And then weekly get a sense of where you are on like stress hormones, any weight gain, what's your water, body fat content by the end of the month, cholesterol levels and triglyceride levels probably twice a month. Like really get a really detailed understanding of what that's going to look like over a period of time. And I have enough of the discipline as a person to be able to eliminate as many of the variables as possible. One of the things you have in a study like that being done is you get people who come in and say like, yeah, we're going to see what affects an hour exercise a day does for a person. But in a study like that, they don't have a means of restricting the diet of all the participants to be the exact same diet. And ideally in a study, what you want is 1,000 people who start from the same resting metabolic rate, start from the same daily activity levels from their jobs, who have the same eating habits, so you don't have one vegan and one carnivore, and you'd have all the measures possible being equal, and you change one variable for a third of them. You do a different change for a third of them, and you do no change for a third of them. So your control group. And you see how those results turn out. And that means every day, everybody eats the exact same thing over and over again. I can do that as an individual. I have previously had to do stuff like that to manage my own health, because for years, my body wouldn't absorb most foods. There were 3 foods that I ate every meal, every day for 5 years. I can do that. And I can eat them at measured intervals. I eat them at the same time every day. And I can make sure that my exercise levels, I could do the same routine every day for my exercise routine. I could do data like that. Unfortunately, A, I'm a sample size that's not ideal. B, I have compounding medical conditions that make it a little bit harder. So my inability to absorb as well as other people certain vitamins means that my data is already skewed for some things. Because here's the thing, like, we don't know if the B12 levels of an average person affect how their body responds to carbohydrates. And me doing that experiment won't clarify that at all. And if eating high carbohydrate intake causes a spike in my triglycerides, we can't say that that'll be the same thing for you. In part because I have atypical biological responses to certain things. Does my inability to absorb certain things into my system also mean that what might be in my, the B vitamin fortified breads that you might consume, does the B12 level that you absorb from fortified foods benefit your cardiovascular system in a way that eliminates the dangers of a higher triglyceride level? Because you won't find that out from me, because I don't absorb those B12s well. So you can't use me to measure what works for you. And so, like, I am not the ideal person to be doing something like this. But here's the thing. There isn't a standard that meets the needs of everybody. There's not an off-the-shelf that gets us the results, because it's not like saying, like, I have a weird mutation that sets me aside. It's that in any 100 people, 10% are going to not respond in the typical format this way, and 23% are going to respond slightly irregular this way, and 31% are going to respond atypically in an entirely different direction. And there's no way to fucking know who's who. And the things that make them different are apparently unrelated, but we won't know that. They may in fact be a contributing factor to some of these things. Some of the stuff they've been looking at for studies about things like the Mediterranean diet being good for heart health, they're finding that the methodology of that study is in question, in part because when the people brought in to do that study were brought in, there was a selection bias because it was too hard to get a random population. So you ended up with sort of like a selection bias. Oftentimes it would be entire families of 12 to 30 some odd people who were all in the same group of eating the same way that saw the benefits of that. The question at that point becomes, the study should have recognized that it's entirely possible that the health benefit wasn't from the diet, but family genetics. You've chosen an entire population with another factor in common other than the diet. Likewise, there were issues of region and location. If you're in a smoggy city versus a rural village, yes, you're going to have higher instances of heart disease in a smoggy city. But if you don't account for that difference, you just see, if you did like a study where like 80% of the city population were on a non-Mediterranean diet and 80% of the rural population were on the Mediterranean diet, if you're looking at the data at the end of the study and that data doesn't include the regions and locations they're from, you can assume from your data that a Mediterranean diet benefits heart health. But in fact, it may just be environmental exposures or family genetics. And so, like, sample size and selection bias and confirmation bias and some of these other little tricks make it really hard to do good studies on what's beneficial health-wise. But we still know to a certain degree that eating candy bars 7 times a day is not a healthy way to do that. Like, we know instinctively that there is no part of that that's a healthy way to do things. But, and that's one of the other things about doing things like I'm going to be doing, is the ramifications of bad choices may be long-term consequences. So like I could do a month of saying, like, let's see how smoking affects my health. If I did a 1 month starting smoking and smoke 5 cigarettes a day for 1 month to see how it affects my health, the end result of that month is going to be negligible. But I have had family members who had a 25-year-long 2-pack a day smoking habit. The effects of that on their long-term health were not negligible. But, doing an experiment for a month isn't going to get you the epidemiological consequences of that as a lifestyle. So these are not, I'm sort of saying, like, these are not going to be scientifically rigorous or particularly applicable data sets. This is a little bit more of saying, like, this is what happens to me, and this is how I learn it about how my body responds to this in the short term, and what that means for me making plans about how to incorporate these things properly for my own health benefit. Yeah, I sort of rambled. I don't know how far off track I got for that. I hope some of that makes sense. So looking at my data for where I was researching today, I got my planning better organized. I know the last few times where I've tried to talk about stuff, it got very confused really quickly because I was not organizing it well. Since then, I have put together things a little bit better. So I've put together what I'm working on right now, which is the building the base exercise routine and the base diet, to which I will resort back to between the 4-week experiments. And so I have my base diet delineated. I have my base fitness set up as a 7-day cycle that I can repeat over and over again, with a secondary swap-in option for advancing or progressing some of those routines. And then I have my plan for the high carb meals, my plan for the cardio exercises, my plan for what to eat for keto, which in this case is going to be things like omelets, tuna, bacon, ground beef, mixed nuts, nut butters, actual butter, fish, yogurt, pork rinds, hollandaise sauce, ranch, Alfredo, and veggies. And then what I was calling Plio, I think I may have to rename that. But I'm looking at doing something along the lines of like the 5-minute warm up, 10 minutes, I'm calling it dominant, 5 minutes secondary, 10-5, 10-5, 10-5. And then of those, what we're looking at is day 1 would be a lower body dominant and an upper body secondary. But day 2 would be upper body dominant and lower body secondary, and alternate back and forth for 6 days, rest on the 7th day. And so we're looking at, for basic, simple ones that I can do for each of those, I'm looking at box jumping, battle ropes, hurdle leaping, plio push-ups or punches, and long jump, shot put. So basically looking for explosive exercises. Now, in that case, it's like box jumping. There are a couple different things that some people refer to as box jumping. I've seen people jumping in a square pattern and calling it box jumping. That's not what I'm talking about. It's jumping up to a thing and then jumping down from a thing. And that's very plyometric. Whereas battle ropes, I do not believe is usually classified as plyometric. Hurdle leaping, again, is another jumping one, but it's a different type of jumping. It has more horizontal movement. It's more of an arc. There's a ballistics to it, whereas jumping onto a tower and off of a tower is more about vertical clearing. Plio push-ups are pushing so that you get thrust off the floor. So you could do push up, clap, catch yourself, and go. So that kind of thing is more of an explosive thrust rather than a gradual muscle movement. The punches that I'm referring to here are based more off of a martial arts style. There are a couple examples I saw online of somebody doing a series where you go up to a wall, you get close to the wall, you put your fist against the wall, and you push, and then you move out a little bit and you do that again. You're sort of like, it's already against the wall, so you're not punching the wall, but you're doing the thrust of the hit, and you're leaning into that thrust. So it's all kind of like you've already met the resistance, so there's no impact, but you're getting the full thrust of thrusting on it. And it's an explosive activity. Long jump, again, is sort of like taking that, jump onto a box, jumping hurdles, and long jump are sort of different arcs of the same kind of explosive energy expression. And then shot put is, again, taking a thing from rest and rapidly moving it to an accelerated rate. It's not a gradual push, it's explosive or ballistic. And so those are sort of like what I'm calling plio, but I know it's not technically plio. And so those are the workouts for that. I'm doing that at the same time I'm doing the keto. Well, they will overlap for a week. I will do the keto first and then the plio with a week overlap between the two of them. And then after plio ends, I will start, like 2 weeks later, I think, I start the high protein. And that's pretty easy to do. That's chicken breast, egg white, lean meats, gelatin, and veggies. And that's pretty much everything I need there. I mean, we already figured out what the high carb diet is. Now, the cardio exercises for the cardio 4-week period, I have as stairs, rowing, cycling, boxing, dancing, jump rope, rest day with possibly swimming if I want to. Now, the thing about cardio is they benefit most from doing a thing for a long period of time and not necessarily changing up the routine. So that one, I'm not really doing like 10 minutes stairs, 5 minutes rowing, 10 minutes cycling. No, it's just like literally for an hour each day, you do that one thing. Now, after high protein is weight training, I think is what we're going to decide on now. High intensity interval training is something you do in about 20-minute time period. And since I'm focused less on the caloric burn per exercise and more focusing on what I'm able to do at the beginning, being improved by what I can do at the end, and basically just committing to a certain time period per day for a month. So, I might be able to lift a 15-pound weight for a bicep curl for 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 5 times during an hour, and then switch over to leg presses or shoulder work or bench press and get different sets for the whole length of time. I'm not going to get to the point where I don't imagine at any point am I going to be doing a 1 hour of curls kind of exercise. And I'm certainly not going to be doing like how many reps of this do I have to do? Like, that's not my focus. What I'm looking to be able to do is, and it's not like, can I curl 150 pounds on a barbell? Like, that's not the focus, but that's closer to the focus, where I start day one and I'm barely able to do much. By the end of the month, I want to be able to do more easier than I did at the start. But I also want to be able to say, like, this is how I progressed over an hour every day for a month. That's the standard measure of, like, an hour every day. If nothing changes, I'm able to do that hour every day. But more than likely, my capabilities will increase over that time. But it's not changing the caloric expenditure necessarily, and it's not, do I look buffer? Did I lose 10 pounds? Any of that crap. None of that's my point. Am I more physically able? Are there health benefits for what I did? You get an hour every day to work towards those goals. And I think that's reasonable. I think that's really where I want to go. Now, weight training, like, I'm looking at a list of different things, and so they have things like squats, leg presses, lunges, deadlifts, leg extensions, leg curls, standing calf raises, seated calf raises, hip adductor, bench press, chest fly, push-ups, pull-ups, pull down, bent over row, upright row, shoulder press, shoulder fly, lateral raise, shoulder shrug, push down, tricep extensions, bicep curls, crunches, Russian twist, leg raise, and back extensions. And honestly, considering some of the exercise routines I've done over the last few days and my awareness of my muscular inabilities, like there are certain things that my muscles are all set for and I could do long stints with. But weirdly, just barely adjacent things are impossible for me. And so I fully expect that I could take this entire list and I would probably find that doing 3 reps off of each of these things might just be what I can achieve the first day of doing the weight training that way. Maybe I'll be more fit when the time comes. Maybe I'll do better and I can do 10 reps at a certain light to medium weight for each of them. And then get to a point where I could do more of them at a higher weight by the end. But I fear and moderately suspect that having this many, and I may just take this whole list as is, the squat, leg press, lunge, leg extension, leg curl, standing calf raises, seated calf raise, hip abductor, and deadlift. Those are all going to be leg based, and I am going to feel them fast. But if I do a series of workout routines where I do maybe 5 reps and 3 sets of 5 reps over that hour for half of them, and then the next day do a different set of the other half, and then the upper body ones, again, I do half of them and switch over to a different half the second day. And I could probably grow that number to be more like sets of 10, higher weight, maybe 4 to 5 reps of that set. That's sort of the goal, to at the end be able to do more than you did when you started. And so that's sort of where I'm at, looking at like the list here. It's a pretty substantial list. Now, a lot of them are going to have overlap of what they cover. And nicely, I found a couple sources that say like, so like for those lower body ones that I listed, what part of the body do they work? The exercise works calves, quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, hips, or other. Lower back and lats are really like the category. And, then they have the trapezius, abdominals, pectorals, deltoids, triceps, biceps, and forearms. And so like the squats may work the abdominals, the hips and other, glutes, and quadriceps. And those are it's the quadriceps, glutes, hips and other, and abdominals definitely. The calves, hamstrings, and lower back some. Now, leg presses are predominantly quadricep and glutes. Lunges are going to be quadriceps, hamstring, glutes, and hips. Deadlifts are going to be quads, hamstrings, glutes, hips, lower back, and then some calves, trapezius, and abdominals, and forearms. Because a deadlift is using your arms, but it's mostly as a holder while you lift with the legs. Leg extensions are pretty much exclusively quadricep. But then like a bench press is probably going to be predominantly pectoral and triceps with some deltoids. So I can really see about targeting specific muscles and setting up sets so that I don't day 1 and day 2 work the same muscle to exhaustion and damage. So I can space them a little bit better. And so that's sort of the next thing that I'm working on, is really just kind of figuring that out, what makes the most sense, and see what I can do with those. And it may be that I may have to do a 4 or 5 day routine so that between day 1 and day 5, I don't overwork the same muscle group. But I'll take a look through this, and it's the sources that I found that detail which ones it definitely uses, which one it sometimes uses, and which ones it doesn't use. It's a valuable resource for doing that. But yeah, so this is under the category of weight training exercises. And organized by muscle group. Now, a little more research on, originally finding out what weight to start with for me and how many reps to do for the best benefit. Like, does it make more sense to do like one day do your max capability in weight for short reps, and then 2 days later do high reps, low weight on that same muscle group to maximize the benefit? I don't know yet what makes the most sense. But technically I don't have to worry about that till about November, when I start planning to initiate this. But I'm doing the research now because it's important for me to try to figure it out and plan for it. But I've got a little time to do some correction. So that's sort of where I am on things right now. Outside of that, I've pretty much got everything worked out. Like, that's pretty much all the things I need to do. That's the backup fitness routine. So my calendar says I start the weight training, I guess I'll call it now, at 24th of November. So I've got plenty of time. If I need to make any adjustments, I'll make adjustments, but coming out with the rough plan, and things will change between now and then, because the routine I'm doing right now, as much as it's not focused on weight training, will increase my strength levels, my base from which to start. So if I were to try to do the weight training now, I imagine I would have to start at low weights and low reps just to get used to it without damaging myself. But I imagine in about 4 months, after getting some endurance boosts from doing cardio and getting some explosive energy boosts from the pleo, and some, doing some of that stuff will also benefit my gradual muscle use too. It's not just the explosive muscles, not the fast twitch that benefit from most of the things I'll do. All muscles will benefit. The goal is to build a series of exercises that focus on the fast twitch, but as collateral, the slow twitch will also benefit from those. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting series of events. We're coming up on Friday, so you got Friday and Saturday left on this, and I will try to detail my whole plan by Saturday night for the next 6 months. But after that, we start a whole new week of creative stuff, and that's going to be writing, I think, again. So I am at an hour, so I'm going to call it for tonight. I will see you tomorrow, and I will try to be better about getting on at a reasonable time. I look at the clock and go, oh, like I got an hour and a half, and then I get working on something, and I look up and goes, oh, I should have been on about 45 minutes ago. Crap. So that's sort of where I am right now. I got to be better about it. I'm working on it. All right. Talk to you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves and have a good night.